This is the policy statement for the state of Jefferson. These are the goals we would like to achieve. Now, Michael tells me, Michael's got a check rein on me, and he says, well, I don't know if we can do that, but we can ask for it, and we can try. And if we can pull these things off, we will have a state that guarantees liberty for 100 generations until a really slick load of politicians figures out a way to get around the backside. And then we will have secured liberty. It'll be the next generation's turn to fight for it on their own. First of all, liberty is the most important thing. This is the general principles of the state of Jefferson. Liberty first, liberty last, liberty always. Without liberty, nothing else matters. And as I said before, without liberty, you're not going to be allowed to keep the money. Without liberty, you will not be allowed to use your property. You may not even be allowed to keep your property. Liberty is the most important thing in our lives. There are aspects of our lives, our property, our business, our culture, in which government has no place and no authority and should not be allowed. What Judge Napolitano said, the right to be let alone. It's very, very important, the right to be let alone. That was well put. The Constitutional Convention for Jefferson will put in place a government which will be strictly limited in scope, size, and power. The Constitution will adhere to the founding principles of this nation. The Jefferson Constitution will bind government, not people. The Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution binds government, not people. How are we doing? Because with common sense, smart gun control, we still respect the Second Amendment. I don't know, that sounds like double talk to me. You ever read 1984, George Orwell's 1984? There was a term in there called double speak. You make up a really big lie, and what Hitler said, you just repeat it and people will believe it. Well, that's what it is. We need common sense regulation over your natural, inalienable rights. And together with what Samuel Adams said, there's Sam again, with the right to defend those as best you can. All right, so the Constitutional Convention will put in a government strictly limited in scope, size, and power. The Constitution will adhere to the founding principles of the nation. The Jefferson Constitution will bind government, not people. We were endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and property. Those are going to be codified. Government has only one purpose, and one purpose only, and that is to secure the rights of the governed. That's the only function of government. And they derive all their just power from the governed. That's the other principle that will guide Jefferson. And whenever government needs to be altered, it is the absolute right of the people to alter or abolish government and replace it with a form of government more suitable to their needs. That will be codified in our Constitution. A balanced budget will be a constitutional mandate, period. We must balance the budget. We cannot borrow money from our children because we've made a muck of things ourselves. If we make a mess of our finances, we must suffer through it so that we don't burden future generations with our bad judgment. Government is our creation and will never be our master. With debt, we are slaves to that debt, and government becomes our master. We must avoid debt at all costs. I'm not saying that that's entirely possible. However, I have a section on debt that I'll get to in a little minute. Jefferson will reclaim control of federally managed lands for the state's beneficial use. The way we'll do that is with the 9th and 10th Amendment. We will also hold the federal government to the letter and spirit of the United States Constitution and hold them at arm's length with every fiber in our being. Because what is the reason we have a state? Why do we even need a state? What do we need a state constitution for? Why don't we just call ourselves citizens of the federal government? There is a reason to have a state, and that is so state governments and local county governments can interpose themselves between us and the next biggest fish on the block who would swallow our liberty. And in fact, had the governor and the framers of the Constitution of California, had they the sense and compassion for their citizens that God gave an ant, they would realize that we have a constitution in California for a very specific reason. This is the preamble of the Constitution of California. We, the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, that to secure and perpetuate it, we do establish this Constitution. Why do we have a Constitution in California? To secure and perpetuate freedom. How are we doing with that? In Jefferson, those things will mean something because politicians will be on the hook for it, and I will explain why. Debt will be limited in the state of Jefferson to an emergency as defined by 2/3 vote of the legislature and a majority of popular vote, with a strict limit to the term of the debt of 5 years or the longest term that any sitting legislator has. However, that comes out in the Constitutional Convention. So if you want to vote for debt, it will expire at the end of your term, and you will have to live with your constituents throughout that debt's life. That's how we want to define debt. And in times of war, perhaps we need to borrow money to build bridges and do things like that, but we must pay that off promptly, and we must pay it off before the next generation takes the reins of power. In fact, we must pay it off before the next person unseats you and takes over your reins of power. That's the point of the debt. Jefferson will join the Western Lands Council, or the American Lands Council, the effort led by the state of Utah in order to help reclaim state jurisdiction over federal land. Constitution and government, the legislature. Jefferson Constitution will outline the structure for our new state. Our goal is a state with equal representation for each and every county in the state Senate, no matter how small, no matter how big, equal representation. That's the deliberative body, and it is supposed to be more careful in its judgment as opposed to the unbridled power of the people, which is reflected in the assembly. Our assembly will consist of representatives at a ratio of 1 assemblyman, and we're going to start at 2,000 people. Now, for 1 million residents, that's manageable. That's not very many. And even as our state grows, with a part-time legislature, we should be able to maintain that ratio for a very, very, very long time, maybe generations upon generations. That's what our goal is. If the court forces us to back off, we will dig in and scratch at that, and we will back off as little as possible and hope to achieve something between 2,000 and 4,000 for a ratio for the assembly. But our goal is no county has less than 1 representative in the assembly. If you are taxed as an entity, you deserve representation to say how that money is spent. Let's see. Lobbyists will be illegal. Now, I've said that, and that's a great goal. But we have a little problem with that. When you go to your government and you have a problem, you have the First Amendment right to petition your government for redress of grievance. That makes you a lobbyist. You are lobbying your government for something that you want. So we have to do that carefully. I believe it can be done. It'll be up to the wording in the Constitutional Convention and in that provision to prevent commercial lobbyists from usurping the power of the people. I think that we will find at 1 representative for 2,000, it's going to be extremely difficult to bribe someone without everybody knowing. Well, I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for us, but we're certainly, and one thing I marvel at this event is we have so much talent in this room. Every place I go, we have PhDs, we have people who have political science degrees, we have lawyers, doctors, we have everybody. We can figure this part out. That's going to be a tough one, but we need to figure it out because lobbyists have ruined this state. The Jefferson legislature will meet for 90 days per year. That's not a concrete statement, it's just a good target. And of course, all of the things I'm talking about are subject to change at the Constitutional Convention. This is not me dictating to you. This is us making suggestions as to how our vision of the state should be so that you can take it to the Constitutional Convention and codify it, throw it out completely, embellish upon it, expand it, and do whatever you, as the people of Jefferson, think necessary. But this is just a point that we want to start from. And from there, it's up to you folks. Jefferson legislature will meet for 90 days a year. Odd years will be spent creating a 2-year budget. We will have zero-sum budgets. Every department will have to come in every single budgetary cycle and say, I need this much money and this is why, and defend their position. There won't be any of this, I don't want to explain my department to you, you don't need to know. You're above this. I'm the bureaucrat that handles this nonsense, so just give me 20% more than you gave me last year and everything's going to be cool. That's not going to happen. You will have to defend your position to the legislature every budgetary cycle, and it better be good, or you may not get as much as you got last time. As far as the budget goes, our retirement plan for new state employees, I imagine it to be a defined contribution plan, which is something that states and counties can budget for. In other words, when you were hired by the Jefferson State Engineer's Office, at that time, projecting you will have, based on your age, a 20-year career, a 19-year career, or whatever it is, you'll be handed a statement. If you make it here for 19 years, at the end of that time, you're going to have so much in your retirement account that we put there. You manage it yourself. If you're good with money, you're going to do great. If you're lousy with money, too bad. Better put it in the bank or something. But this is the amount we're going to contribute because we can budget for that. Your county can budget for that. Your city can budget for that. If you can't afford those contributions, don't hire that employee. Figure out a way to do without him. That way we can avoid the debt and we can avoid the unfunded mandates. All of these retirement plans will have to be fully funded every single year, so put that in your budget. Don't be a fool. Plan accordingly and plan wisely, and your county will prosper. If you don't, your county will not prosper, and people will move away to other counties that do prosper. So in that case, counties, I would say, would be the boilerplate of democracy. If your feet get hot, you can always go next door. That's what they're doing in Los Angeles County. They're bailing out. Let's see. Each legislator will only be allowed to introduce one bill per legislative cycle. Yeah, I like that one myself. Now, in times of emergency, we might have to make that two. That was another one that the legal team said, wow, that's pretty narrow definition. I mean, I like it because you make sure a guy is efficient. But we may have to make that two, and the Constitutional Convention will decide that. But what we don't want is a situation we had in Sacramento 2 weeks ago where the state Senate approved 500 pieces of legislation in less than an hour. You think they read any of them? No. We want to avoid that. And what we want to avoid is what the people in Sacramento call the sausage mill, where the last week of the legislative session, they are just sitting there grinding out laws. I mean, the Federal Register alone adds something like 2,000 pages per day. You know what that's designed to do? It creates an Irish democracy. That's what we have in California. We have an Irish democracy where there are so many rules and regulations, you can't know them, I don't know them. I mean, I'm a cop and I don't know them. I can't even pretend to know them. I carry around a computer all the time so that I can look up the weird ones. I say, by God, I don't even believe that's a law. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. But anyway, it creates an Irish democracy where the government knows one thing every single day about you. You are a lawbreaker. You are a lawbreaker. You're a lawbreaker. You're a lawbreaker. So are you, and you. And all we have to decide is what day do we want to go pick you up? Because you have broken the law, I guarantee you. Somebody wrote a book a while back that declared that everybody commits 1.5 felonies per day. I mean, that's a little extreme, but you see where I'm going with it. So that's why we want to limit each legislator, and we'll also have a constitutional review for that. So the Constitution will mandate a periodic review to eliminate superfluous or arbitrary laws and regulations through the legislative process. In other words, but we're not going to have a board that says we don't like this and we don't like that, because whenever you put unelected bureaucrats in charge of your lives, bad things happen. So what we'll do is we'll have an Office of Legislative Review, and they will periodically review the Public Safety Code, the Health and Institutions Code, the Welfare Code, the Government Code, and say, you know, gosh, nobody uses carriages to drive on the interstate anymore, so we can go ahead and eliminate those laws. And then the legislature will have to approve that. So everything that we do will be approved by a legislature. Let's see. Each legislature, back to the laws. Bills by law will have to be placed on the Jefferson Legislative website a minimum of 30 days prior to any vote in the legislature. No amendments will be allowed once the bill has been posted to the website. Each legislator will have to maintain his or her own website and post bills that he authors to that website. You will then, you as his constituents or her constituents, will have 30 days to conduct a vote on whether you agree with that piece of legislation or not. Now we have a Republican form of government. In other words, your legislator will not be bound to vote by your wishes, but he will be bound to keep a record of those votes. And so when the election cycle commences, you can look and see, well, this guy voted against his constituents 91 times out of 100. What do you think we want to do with that fella? And if he votes with the people and you have a good feeling for how he does his job, you re-elect him. And if you don't, it's easy to get rid of him, because you go to your neighbors and they'll probably agree with you, and out the bum goes. So 30 days prior, no amendments, you vote on the legislation, and the results of these votes are archived for your education and your edification prior to the next election cycle. Taxes and revenue. Our system of revenue collection is going to be unique in the country. It will provide checks upon the power of the state and the federal government. Our Constitution will codify a system where counties collect taxes, after which they pass to the state that portion of the budget that the state needs to live on. In other words, the state will never be able to use your money against you, because your county will hold on to the money. In other words, if you pay $1 in taxes as a county representative, and the state averages 12% of its collections in order to survive, and I've just pulled that number out of the air, then the county will send that check for 12 cents to the state. It will not be something where you send $1 to the state, and then they tell your board of supervisors, you can spend this 10 cents the way you want to. And if you don't follow the will of the state, we will withhold the money from you and you can't operate. What we want to avoid is having the state being able to use your money against you. County collects the taxes, sends to the state its portion of the budget. And in that way, we hope to avoid unfunded mandates. In fact, I want unfunded mandates to be illegal. I shouldn't be able to tell you as a state representative how you should clean your sewers or keep your sidewalks up. That's for you to decide. If you do it well, you're going to have a great county. If you don't do it well, your constituents in that county will replace you and find someone who will do it well. Look, liberty is messy. You're not going to have the nanny state taking care of all your problems. If you make a mess of your streets and roads, you're going to have messy streets and roads. That's how it works. But you unelect the bum that did that, and you get someone in there that can fix it, and you will have to pay attention to the process in order to do that. And that's the way liberty was designed to work. Local decisions requiring local revenue will be made locally. The state will provide input and advice only if requested by a county. There will be no state-sponsored welfare program. You are in the best position to know who needs help in your county. Welfare will be handled by church groups and community service organizations. The state of Utah is a very successful private welfare organization where they invite the person who's in trouble to come before the church council or community service council, and they say, what do you need? And the guy says, I'm broke, I don't have a job, I don't have any money, I can't pay my rent. At that point, the community service organization says, here's the deal, we're going to loan you $2,000. We have several apartments that we rent out to guys like you. You can have that apartment for 7 months. Oh, and by the way, we got you a job at Ed's Body Shop. Now, what we want you to do is you're going to pay back that $2,000 at $300 a month for the next 8 years or whatever. And that's how you pay it back so that we can loan the $2,000 to the next guy in trouble. That's how that should work. Now, there are circumstances that are beyond that control for children or behavioral health, and we'll have to figure out a way to handle that adequately and responsibly. I don't know all those answers, but we have plenty of talent in the room, and I'm sure we can figure those things out. Let's see. Federal dollars will be assigned to successful and efficient community or county organizations to help the needy. So if we get federal dollars, the state, unlike the state of California, the state of Jefferson is not going to rake off 40 to 44% of the money and then give you the dregs. You are going to get the money. The state will have to administer those programs, and they have to pay people to do it, but they don't have to pay them 40%. So the counties will receive the lion's share of all of that money divided up to them according to their population or their need or however we decide. They will then use that money in a way they see fit. Federal dollars for behavioral health will be apportioned to county hospitals or county health organizations. Again, local decisions made locally. We as a state will not tell you how to spend that money. That's for you to decide. And the better job you do, the better community you're going to construct and maintain. Federal income taxes. This is going to be one that we're all going to have to fight for. And I mean fight. This is going to be the big fight. This will be the biggest fight of our state, and we can win. You know, if 3% of us can take a state from the most corrupt and entrenched government this country has ever known, we can also accomplish this. And what we're going to do is federal income taxes will be sent to a pass-through account held by the state of Jefferson. And they will be transmitted to the federal government conditioned upon its adherence to Article 1, Section 8. In other words, if the federal government operates within the confines of the federal Constitution, they will receive our tax dollars. The federal government will not be in a position to use our own money against us. And that's how we want to do federal taxes. We will make every conceivable effort to create a state of affairs through which the federal government will not be able to use Jefferson's money to coerce compliant behavior. That happens all the time in the state of California. Federal monies coming to the states will be apportioned to the counties. In other words, the state's job is to make your lives better and to protect your liberty. The state's job is not to tell you how to spend the money that the federal government gives you back from your federal taxes. So what the state of Jefferson will do is establish offices to give advice when asked for, and otherwise give the money to your county representatives to spend as they see fit in your county. And you are in control of that because you put them in their chairs. And you're going to put state officials in their chairs, and they're going to be accountable to you. So it would behoove you to educate yourselves and pay attention to the process, because it will be directly proportional to our knowledge how successful we are. The financial model for our new state is on the website. Steve Baird constructed it. He's a very, very bright guy financially. He constructed a financial model that's open. We all know that. You can tinker with the numbers and what if the numbers. But we think that our worst day is going to be our last day as Californians. I mean, look, we have no place to go but up from here.